Take the exit. Turn right into the drive-thru.
Nope, I'm making dinner tonight.
You don't have time. Josh has practice.
Oh, that's right. I'll just get a salad.
And fries?
No, just the salad.
But salad cancels fries.
Salad only.
Fries.
Salad.
Fries.
Food noise isn't fair, but Mochi Health is. The affordable GLP-1 source that puts you on the road to successful weight loss.
Hey, can I get the...
Fries.
Salad. Sorry.
Learn more at joinmochi.com. Mochi members have access to licensed physicians and nutritionists. Results may vary.
This episode of Voices for Justice is sponsored by Shopify. Starting a business is filled with a lot of what-ifs. What if I fail? What if nobody listens to the podcast? What if nobody cares? It can definitely be hard to get over that doubt and uncertainty, but making that leap was one of the best things I've ever done, and it's great to know that I'm not alone with a business partner like Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world, and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Heinz and Mattel to brands just getting started. And I'm telling you, their tools really do feel like you have a business partner. They have hundreds of ready-to-use templates to help build a beautiful online store that matches your brand. You can also get the word out like you have an entire marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And if you get stuck, Shopify is always there to help with their award-winning 24/7 customer service. It's time to turn those what-ifs into with Shopify today. Sign up for your $1 per month trial today at shopify.com/justice. Go to shopify.com/justice. That's shopify.com/justice.
You're listening to this podcast, so I know you've got a curious mind. Here's a helpful fact you may not know yet. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $900 on average. Pop over to Progressive.com, answer some questions, and you'll get a quick quote with discounts that are easy to come by. In fact, 99% of their auto customers earn at least one discount. Visit Progressive.com and see if you can enjoy a little cash back. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $946 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2024 and May 2025. Potential savings will vary.
Voices for Justice is a podcast that uses adult language and discusses sensitive and potentially triggering topics, including violence, abuse, and murder. This podcast may not be appropriate for younger audiences. All parties are innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Some names have been changed or omitted per their request or for safety purposes. Listener discretion is advised. My name is Sarah Turney, and this is Voices for Justice. Today, I am discussing a story of survival, the story of Kara Robinson Chamberlain. Back in 2002, when Kara was just 15 years old, she was in the front yard of her friend's home in Columbia, South Carolina, when a man approached her. At first, he seemed friendly. He asked if her parents were home, saying he just wanted to drop off some pamphlets. Kara explained that it wasn't her house and her friend's mother wasn't home. This is when the man pulled out a gun, pressed it against her neck, and forced Kara into a storage bin in the back of his vehicle. Kara was held and assaulted for 18 hours before she escaped. Through the information she was able to provide to law enforcement, they discovered that the man who took her was Richard Evonitz. And he wasn't just a kidnapper and a pedophile. He was a serial killer. Before taking Kara, he'd killed 3 other girls from the state of Virginia. 16-year-old Sofia Silva in 1996, and sisters, 15-year-old Kristin Lisk and 12-year-old Kati Lisk in 1997. At the age of 15, Kara Robinson Chamberlain not only heroically escaped her captor, she helped police catch a serial killer before he could kill again. Her story is nothing short of incredible. The thing is, it's not my story to tell. So I invited Kara on the podcast to tell her story in her own words. In addition to discussing what happened in 2002, Kara and I discuss her experience with the media, how we really feel about the term closure, and ethics in true crime as it specifically relates to consent in telling stories of survival like Kara's. We have a lot to discuss, so let's get into it. This is the case of Kara Robinson Chamberlain. All right. Well, Kara, thank you for coming on the podcast to tell your story and also talk true crime with me. Before we get into everything, can you introduce yourself to my listeners?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I am Kara Robinson Chamberlain. I am 35 years old and I am a survivor of a serial killer.
Wow. Whenever I hear, I have watched your interviews, and every time I hear that, it takes my breath away. And so I do want to talk about all things true crime with you, especially consent when it comes to telling stories of survival like yours. And I also want to highlight all of the amazing things that you do. But before we get to all of that, I just want to stay kind of in chronological order and start with, your story. And I want to start with, I would love to know kind of what your childhood was like. Did the area you lived in feel safe? I'm sure you've been asked this a million times, but I just kind of want to set the scene a little.
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in Lexington, South Carolina. I grew up like riding horses and I was an animal lover and I rode go-karts and dirt bikes. It was a kind of more rural area. I had friends who lived in a little bit of more like a suburban area. And so it was definitely a safe kind of place. We never really knew anyone who, my friends and I, we didn't know anyone who had been victims of crime by any means, nothing crazy. This was the early 2000s. So it was just, you didn't hear about things like you do now. I think now with the internet, you hear more. And so I think it's a little more intimidating to hear all these bad things that happen, but that was not the case then.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. Like, I knew growing up in my neighborhood, I didn't live in the best neighborhood, and there were definitely those houses that you tried to avoid. So I kind of grew up with that paranoid, I guess, feeling, if you will, that anything could happen. The neighborhood could be a little scary, but it wasn't like that for you. So I have to imagine that obviously all of this really took you by surprise. I mean, you were 15, you're at your friend's house, you're watering the plants, and all of a sudden this happens. And again, I don't want to speak for you, but yeah, do you want to walk us through that day?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, I was at my friend's house. I had stayed the night there. We were getting ready for our day. We decided we were going to go to the lake. And so she wanted to get ready, take a shower. She called her mom and asked if there was anything that we needed to do before we left. And her mom asked her to water the plants outside. So I said, okay, I'll do that. That way we can get out of the house a little bit faster. You take a shower, I'll water the plants. And so I was outside doing that. And I noticed a car on the way out of the neighborhood. And I was getting ready to get my license. So I was kind of paying attention to cars. And I was like, oh, I think that's a car that I would like. And it was going on the way out of the neighborhood when I noticed it. And shortly after, it came back into the neighborhood and pulled directly into the driveway. Now, I had heard the stranger danger, don't talk to strangers kind of talk, but I was 15 years old. I had never experienced anything scary like that. And I had also heard a story from my friend that her mom had someone that had pulled into the driveway and stopped a few days previously that had seen her outside. And it was like a high school friend or something. So I had just heard this story. So no red flags went up, anything like that. A man got out. He looked very normal. It's not the creepy bad guy that we grew up seeing on like America's Most Wanted or Unsolved Mysteries, right? So he's a very normal looking guy. And he walked over to me and told me he had some pamphlets that he was giving out. And he saw me outside and asked if he could give them to me. And he stayed a respectable distance away from me. I had no issues with him entering my personal space. And I said, well, this is my friend's house and, her mom's not home. And he said, okay, well, I'll just give them to you and you can leave them for her mom. I said, okay. And so at that point, he was kind of standing across from me and he entered into my personal space at that point to hand me the pamphlets, which again would have been normal. So while I was looking down at those, he put his arm around the right side of my neck and he had a small caliber handgun that he could conceal behind his hand. And he said, why don't you come with me? And I said, stop. And he again said, why don't you come with me? And I knew that it was a gun. I could feel, the cold metal. And so he walked me around with his arm around my neck the whole time. He walked me around to the driver's side of his car, and he opened the car door, and he put the two-door car. He put the seat forward and told me to get into the car. I looked in the back seat, and there was a big plastic container back there. And I said, where do I go? And he said, get in the container. And so I did. I got into the container. He loosely set the lid on top, and he got in the car. He pulled out of the driveway and he drove away. And so that was the beginning of this ordeal. And I knew from the very beginning that I would escape. There was never a question in my mind. I said, okay, this guy is going to let his guard down at some point. He's going to get complacent, and that will be my chance to escape. So I was just praying the whole time that I would see an opportunity to escape and gathering information for when that moment did come. So the first thing that I started paying attention to were the turns that we were taking, trying to see where we were. And then I felt us get onto the interstate. And at that point, I realized that I would no longer know where we were. So I was memorizing the songs that were on the radio. There was a serial number on the inside of the container. I memorized that. So just it was the beginning of me kind of cataloging this information, anything that might be helpful. So he drove for about 10 minutes before he pulled over. And at that point, he put handcuffs on me and a gag in my mouth, and drove another couple of minutes before he stopped the car and took the container with me in it into his apartment. So that began an 18-hour ordeal of me being held captive, being sexually assaulted multiple times. So I was there with him, didn't know his name, but was trying to gather information about him for my escape because, like I said, I knew I was going to escape, and that's what I did.
I mean, wow, I get chills every time I hear you tell that story, and in my research I've heard you tell it several times, but every time it astounds me, and I have to ask, like, how did you know to do that? It sounds like you remained so calm, you focused on the end solution, you were looking for, any type of identifiers that could help, lead back to this guy. How did you know to do that, or did it just happen?
I think that the human will to survive is something that we can never underestimate. And I had never been told what to do in this type of situation, but there was something inside of me. There was an intuition that knew, okay, this guy has taken me. Grown men don't take young girls unless they want to do harm to them in some way, shape, or form. And I somehow had an intuition also that he would want me to be emotional, and I am very stubborn, and I refuse to give that to him. So my survival mechanism was, okay, we're going to lock all of that down because it's too much for us to deal with, right? So a very common trauma coping mechanism is to shut down all of your emotions because it's too much for your body to process. So that was very much what my survival mechanism was. And then that allowed me to be very rational and very, factual and say, okay, so I'm going to escape. This is how I'm going to do it. And when I do get out of here, I need to have information. So it was very much my survival mechanism more than anything.
I mean, I think it's brilliant. I just can't commend you enough. I know that it's not exactly voluntary. So in the same breath, I want to say if somebody couldn't do the same thing, that's okay. I just think you're incredible.
Thank you.
And I'm sure everybody listening really wants to know, how did you escape? How did you do it?
So I knew that the first thing that I would have to do is to escape the restraints first. And so my hands were in handcuffs. There was a quick link that was attached to a rope that was attached to kind of the frame of the bed. And I had to unscrew that quick link. And I actually had to use my teeth to loosen it and then slide my handcuffs out of that. And then I reached down my leg Again, he's still sleeping next to me, and undid the restraint on my leg and then slid out of the bed. At that point, I was able to get one of my hands out of the handcuffs, kind of squeeze it out, and found my shorts and went to the front door and realized there was all this stuff in the way of the front door. There were several moments where, I woke up and I was like, okay, this is it. I'm going to be safe now. And, I got out of this bed. I just have to get out the door. And then I got to the door and I was like, oh no, there's all these noisy things that I have to move. And this is a very small apartment. And so I somehow was able to move all of those things and throw the door open. And I thought, he is sleeping right next to the window that looks out on this front door. He's going to look out. There's a gun right next to the bed. He's going to shoot me. And I just thought, you know what? So what? If he shoots me, it doesn't matter. I'm out. Someone's going to see me. And so I ran. There was a car driving across the parking lot. I ran out in front of it and kind of waved my arms and held my arm up. And I said, my name's Kara Robinson, and I was kidnapped, and I escaped that apartment, and turned around and pointed to it and asked them to remember the apartment, and asked them to take me to law enforcement, which they did.
Wow. I'm like tearing up. It's just so incredible that you got away. And I'm obviously so happy that you got away.
Yeah.
I mean, you must have been just absolutely terrified. Were you still scared when you got to the police station?
I don't think that I had an emotional connection for a very, very long time. When I think of how I felt in that moment, there's very little emotion that's connected to it, which enables me to go and talk about it so openly and so freely, because again, that was my survival mechanism. Now, my body recognized the fear, right? So very much I could feel my heart beating out of my chest, right? And then when I was running, it's the one and only time I've experienced that tunnel vision, which is a trauma response to where I could just, even if I like close my eyes and think of it, I can see like the white car driving across the parking lot, and it's just like what you see on Star Trek when they go in light speed, right? Like on either
Yeah.
side. So I know that my body was feeling a lot, but in my brain there wasn't a lot of emotion.
Yeah. I mean, that's totally fair.
Yeah.
And I know that at a certain point, you're told that this man, you're not the only person that this man has taken, and that in fact he had killed 3 other girls. I do want to honor them and their lives, but I do also want to ask you, how did that make you feel to realize that it could have gone a lot worse for you?
Yeah, it's very complicated because he told me when I was there that he was going to, quote, let me go whenever he was done with me, and that it was my choice if I went to law enforcement. It was always known as the girl who was raped. That was the way he worded it. It kind of like stuck in the back of my brain. But I genuinely believed that he was going to let me go. So law enforcement responded to his apartment. He was obviously gone. They very quickly found evidence that led them to believe he may be tied to these 3 previous murders in Virginia in 96 and 97. And I heard it and I thought, well, we always think that we're different, right? We always think, well, maybe, but I think it would have been different for me. Uh, it took me a very long time to come to grips and understand that no, he definitely would have killed me. And I think I'm still processing it. Here we are almost 20 years later, and I think I'm very much still processing what that means. And I think it could be very easy to get caught up in the what if. And, if I wouldn't have escaped, but I'm like, but I did, right? But I did. So I just kind of try to focus on what actually did happen. And like you said, honor the memories of those 3 girls. And yeah, that's the best we can do.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense to me. And I understand that when they track this guy down, which I'm purposely not using his name because
Yeah.
He doesn't need to
Why
be
does
famous.
it matter?
Exactly. Thank you. When they track this guy down, he ends up taking his own life, which means you didn't get to give that victim impact statement. And, I can imagine how you'd feel, but again, I'm not here to speak for you. So I want to ask, how did that make you feel? And did it impede any of, your healing process?
It made me angry, especially then. As a 15-year-old girl, I was I was mad because I I just thought I outsmarted this guy. Like he picked me because he thought I was going to be an easy victim, and I wasn't. And I wanted him to know that his victim of opportunity was the biggest mistake that he ever made. And so I wanted to sit in court across from him and look him in the eyes and for him to recognize that I was his downfall. Um, Now, as time has passed, I've realized that I'm incredibly lucky that it ended that way for several reasons because I never had to go to court. I never had to have all of the details of what happened to me during those 18 hours put on the stand and told in front of my parents or, the media. I will never have to worry about him getting out of jail or, being up for parole, which I don't think that would have happened anyway. But I don't have to worry about him consuming space. So I think it has made a lot of things easier for me because I can just be like, oh, yeah, this is a thing that happened. And I'm not perpetually being traumatized and perpetually living in that trauma. I could just say, okay, this happened. And then I got to move on from it because he no longer was here.
Yeah. No, actually, that makes so much sense to me. Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I think it is a blessing you didn't have to go through that. I know that those court proceedings can be extremely traumatizing to have to relive all that. So that makes total sense. I do want to ask, about your path to recovery, if you can even. I feel like it's such like a weird word, just like closure, right? Like, what's recovery? What's closure? But how did you deal with all of this? And I guess coming out to the other end where you actually joined law enforcement. I just want to know a little bit about that journey.
Yeah. So the the real answer for how did I deal with it? I didn't. I did not deal with it. So for, I would say, a good 15 years, I thought that was just something that happened. It literally doesn't affect me. For 15 years, I told myself this story. It doesn't affect me. I have no emotional connection to it. It took a very long time to realize how it was affecting me, which the biggest thing is that like I said, I felt no feelings towards that. Well, when dissociation and compartmentalization becomes your coping mechanism, it affects everything. So I realized about 5 or 6 years ago that I had been suppressing all of my emotions, and so I wasn't experiencing the full depth of feelings and emotions that we as humans should be experiencing. And I began to kind of dismantle that and what that looked like, and realized that I was also having some health issues from just being in this constant state of fight or flight because even if we don't recognize our emotions, our body does. Our body feels those emotions, and so this is definitely something I'm still trying to work through. And it's been a lot of self care and a lot of reconnecting with myself. I have not found a version of therapy that I have found helpful yet, and I think that's because everything is just so deep down, and there's previous trauma before that, just kind of like chaotic childhood in general. So there's
But I
a
love that you
lot.
say that. And I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I love
No,
that you
yeah,
say that because everybody talks like therapy is the end all be all of answers. And sometimes it's just not. I am
yeah,
someone where I feel like traditional therapy never really worked for me. So I'm really glad that you said that.
yes, yeah. I think you know that was one of the things that I got a lot after my kidnapping. People saying, "Oh, you have to go to therapy. You
Hmm.
have to." And I was like, "Well, first of all, don't tell me what I have to do, because I would like to exert my own will over myself." And I tried it. I've tried it several times, and I just felt like I've always been able to talk about it. So talking about it with someone else wasn't helpful for me. So I'm in the process of exploring different things, and I think that you will understand this as well. That whenever you have um, not just one big traumatic experience, but you have a series of things that are stressful to your little body when you're smaller. And they wouldn't be a big capital T trauma, right? They would be several smaller traumas. I think that talk therapy is a little more difficult because you're like, I don't know, I feel like Bane, where it's like, you merely adapted to the darkness. I was born into it, right?
Yeah, right.
I'm like, I don't, talk therapy is not going to help me process through kind of what was just a low level of chaos my entire life. So,
Yeah.
and that's, not to say anything bad about my particular upbringing, my parents, but it's just, we all have to find our own way. And for me, therapy was not something that was helpful in general so far. That could change.
Yeah, no, fair enough, fair enough. And I'm sorry I kind of segued you because I was so passionate
No,
about that topic.
I
But yeah,
agree.
yeah, I mean, and we're gonna get into all of that. I can't wait to
Yeah.
talk ethics and
Yeah.
everything with you. But I want to ask how you got into law enforcement. I want to go back to that because I think
Yeah.
I mean, I think I can imagine the answer, but I want to hear it from you.
Yeah. It's funny because it's not the path that I think a lot of people would assume I followed to get there. So, following my kidnapping, I was inundated with law enforcement. There were victims advocates. I was kidnapped from one county and taken to the next county. So I had law enforcement from three different jurisdictions that were just showing up at my house and people and just so many people. And so I had one particular person who was a leader in law enforcement who came to my house a few days after I was kidnapped. And remember, 15 years old, just gone through this big trauma. I believed that he was not going to kill me, right? Because that's what he had told me. We had no evidence at that point to believe anything different because he was not linked to the murders in Virginia at that point. And so I have this law enforcement official who comes to my house and says, well, he was going to kill you, right? Like, you should be dead right now. And I was like, no, I don't. I don't believe that to be true. Um, so I used that story kind of as a juxtaposition to the other sheriff, who is still currently the sheriff of Richland County, Sheriff Lott, who he really just elevated me and treated me like a survivor from day one. And he's a very, very big part of um, why I am who I am today, but he is the reason that I went into law enforcement. So he treated me like a survivor. He gave me awards for bravery, and he took me to dinner and helped me to present an award to the two men who took me to law enforcement. He also, a year after my kidnapping, offered me a job working administratively in law enforcement with him. So I started working, doing administrative work with victim services with Richland County in 2003. And so I did that during the summer through high school. And then when I was home from college, when I was local, I was working there administratively again. Until I graduated college. And at that point, the sheriff said, I was getting ready to graduate, and I thought I wanted to be a teacher. And he said, okay, well, if that's what you want to do, then by all means, please do that. He said, but if there's a way that we can keep you here and we can combine law enforcement with teaching, would you be open to that? And I said, yeah, I'd try it. And so I went to be a school resource officer, which is essentially law enforcement that is in schools, obviously to protect the children if anything should happen, but also to educate the children about law enforcement, about safety, things like that. And so that's when I started in law enforcement, and I realized that I actually really loved law enforcement. I loved talking to people, I loved helping people, and I had essentially grown up in this agency. So it felt very much like home for me to continue to be there because I had worked there from 16 until I was 21 at that point. And so I went to the academy. I was like, oh, I really like this. And so I continued to work there. After I was a school resource officer, I worked in investigations. I worked child abuse and sexual assault cases for a while. And then I worked in victims assistance. And that's a sworn position. And I did that until the birth of my first child.
This episode of Voices for Justice is sponsored by Chewy. If you have pets, you probably know about Chewy, and you also know that when they say that they have everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy, they're not messing around. To keep them happy, Chewy has over 100,000 products from all the brands my pets love at prices I love. To keep them healthy, Chewy offers pet prescriptions, pet insurance, telehealth vet visits, and they're even rolling out vet clinics across the country. I've been shopping with them for a very long time. And in addition to the auto-ship feature that gets the dog's food to them every single month, I also love to experiment with different treats. But I'm a bit picky. For me, it has to be high quality with simple ingredients. I recently picked up treats from Shepherd Boy Farms that are 100% just chicken breast. Popcorn and Heber are already obsessed. Chewy has everything you need to keep your pet happy and healthy. And right now, you can save $20 on your first order and get free shipping by going to chewpanions.chewy.com/Sarah E. Turney. That's chewpanions.chewy.com/Sarah E. Turney to save $20 on your first order with free shipping. chewpanions.chewy.com/Sarah E. Turney. Minimum purchase required. New customers only. Terms and conditions apply. See site for complete details.
You know that thing where you get an amazing pair of shoes at a really great price and want to tell everyone about it? Yeah, so do we. Here at Designer Shoe Warehouse, we'll give you something to brag about, like the latest styles from brands you love, or the trends everyone's obsessing over, or shoes that make you feel like, well, you. So go ahead, show off a little. Find shoes that get you at prices that get your budget. Head to your DSW store or DSW.com today. DSW, let us surprise you.
This episode of Voices for Justice is brought to you by Quince. I've been trying to be more intentional about what I wear each day. I'm leaning into pieces that feel effortless, comfortable, and still put together. And Quince has been my go-to. The fabrics feel elevated, the fits are flattering, and everything just works without overthinking it. They use premium materials like 100% European linen, organic cotton, and ultra-soft denim. And the best part? Everything is priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands. They work directly with ethical factories and cut out the middlemen, so you're paying for quality and craftsmanship, not brand markup. I recently just ordered their tiered linen dress, of course in black. I wanted to pair it with one of my favorite pairs of brown wedges. The problem was, I didn't have a brown purse. So I got that from Quince too. It's one of my favorite outfits. It's easy, effortless, and feels amazing, especially as we're getting a little bit warmer here in Phoenix. Refresh your everyday with luxury you'll actually use. Head to quince.com/justice for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. That's QUINCE.com/justice for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/justice. Wow. Well, okay. So I
Yeah.
do have to take a step back because I've heard you tell this story, and I need you to tell it here about in your training class. You know, you're
Yeah.
in there one day, you're learning how to be a school resource officer, and you see the pictures of the girls who were victims of this guy, and you were obviously taken aback. Can you walk me through
Yeah.
the story? Were you used to seeing these photos like all over the news, or was this like kind of new to you at this point?
So obviously, when I was kidnapped, there was news about it. I didn't really do much in the way of like press or media. I talked to John Walsh about it, but that was about it. He had a talk show at the time, so I went on there. But I had not done anything. So if someone personally knew my story and wanted to talk about it, I would very openly talk to them about it. But as far as on a broad platform, I had not told my story. There were several people that I worked with at the sheriff's department who didn't even know my story. And so I went to the academy and I was sitting there after break. We come back and the, cover for the slideshow of the presentation that we're going to be doing is up, and it's a photo of the three girls from Virginia. And I looked at it and I went, internally, can I say shit?
Yeah.
By the way. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't know. So I saw the photo and internally I just thought, oh shit. That was my immediate thought. I was just like, oh God, what are they going to say? So I had seen their photos. I was familiar with their case, but I just thought I'm going to be outed in front of my entire law enforcement class here of 40 people. They're about to hear my story and they don't know about it. And this is going to be so awkward. And so the way she told the story, she did not have any photos of me. So she said, nobody knew what happened to these girls until in 2002, this girl from South Carolina named Kara. And I think there were like one or two people that kind of turned around in their seats.
Like, wait a second.
Kara.
Yeah.
And so I think maybe a couple people might have made the connection. And then after class, I went up to the instructor and I said, hey, I just wanted to let you know that Kara, and I kind of like pointed to the presentation. And I said, Kara is Kara, and pointed to myself. And her face, just totally gobsmacked. She was just, I think her reaction was probably, oh shit, right?
Oh, yeah, I'm sure she was like mortified.
Yeah. And she said, oh my God, I am so sorry. And I said, it's okay. And she said, but did I get everything right? That was her second question, right? And I said, you did a pretty good job. And
You're
so,
like, no, nobody gets it right, actually. Nobody gets it
no
right.
one ever gets it right. But you did a decent job. And I said, yeah, you did a pretty good job. And she said, okay, I obviously am going to tell the other people at the academy, the higher ups. And they came to me a couple days later and they said, we would really like to present you with an award at graduation. And I said, okay, well, I'm obviously going to have to tell my class. We were a very close law enforcement academy class. I said, I'm obviously going to have to tell them because, we've been here together by the end for several weeks. And they're going to be like, well, why is she getting an award? She's done the same thing we have, right? And
yeah,
so
and your friends and stuff. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so I told them and they were all like, wow, amazing. So I got an award. It's actually behind me here on the shelf.
Oh, wow. No.
Yeah.
That's super sweet, though.
Yeah. Yeah. So I got an award for courage and bravery at the academy at my graduation, but it was very surreal. It was very bizarre to hear that story told. It just, the whole time, I have no idea what she said, honestly.
Yeah.
Like now thinking back on it, because I think the whole time I was just like, internally, I was like, oh no.
Well, and the trauma of it, like I have the worst trauma memory. Like when stuff like that happens, it's like, whoop, like it's just out of my brain.
Right.
So
yeah, totally. I just checked out. All I could think of is anybody going to figure it out? So
right.
It was very weird. And now, I've talked to her since and she's like, I will never forget that day. It's like seared into my brain. I'm like, me too. Don't worry. Like, I don't blame her. Obviously she was, it was a very important like lesson to tell the story. And, but because I think that particular case was about missing persons. And so she was kind of tying it into a case that was local. And so, but yeah, it was very weird.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, and obviously that was used in a training capacity. It's not like she was making content to make money off of it or whatever, which does bring me to the topic of consent in telling survivor stories. And we talked before this. This isn't a surprise that I told you that I have to come clean about this because, when I first started the podcast, I really wanted to feature survivor stories because here, every episode ends with this call to action. And I wanted to kind of prove to people that these aren't just hopes and wishes and dreams. These calls to action, taking action in these cases can lead to recovery, And so I featured the case of your friend, Elizabeth Smart, and I felt uncomfortable doing it. I listened to it again, and you can tell I was uncomfortable doing it. Like, even when I got to the details, of her kidnapping and the horrible things that happened to her, I stopped myself and I was like, go read her book, go to her content, because it made me so uncomfortable. But I think that should have been a sign to me that I shouldn't have done it at all. But like for me, I was so focused on the fact that, of course, she has this amazing story and I cannot give her enough credit. She is very much a huge part of why she was able to escape. And I don't want to take that away from her. And I feel uncomfortable even speaking for her now. But one of the main reasons I really wanted to feature the case was because of the way that it was solved, the way that she was recovered. The fact that John Walsh and her family advocated for this information to get to the media, this sketch of the gentleman who took her, that ultimately helped to lead to her recovery. It led to people seeing that face, to these people making the calls. They saw her at the Burger King and she was found. And I thought that was really powerful. It was a true example of, go above and beyond for these stories. You see something, you say something, you help these people. But now, I feel like I owe Elizabeth an apology, and I will do that privately. That's not something to air publicly on this podcast. It's not something I can apologize to you for, you know what I mean? And you do that
Yeah.
in a roundabout way. So I wanted to come clean, that I feel like I'm guilty of exactly what we're about to talk about. But I also want to show people that you can learn and grow. Obviously I had the best intentions. I still want to make that apology, but and I know you can't speak for everyone. You can't speak for every survivor out there, but I want to ask you, I have you here. How does it make you feel when people feature your story without contacting you, without your consent? How does it feel when you just see it pop up?
Frustrated. That's like the best word I can give, because first of all, this is not always the case, but myself, I am not hard to find. Like if you search for Kara Robinson or Kara Chamberlain or Kara Robinson Chamberlain, my website is the first thing that pops up. It is very easy to find me, and it has been for a while. So it's pretty inexcusable, in my opinion, to not at least reach out. While I may not be able or willing to participate, um, at least ask if it's okay, and bare minimum tag me in social media. I think that there is this mentality of, especially for those of us who are public survivors who have told our story in a public format, there's this mentality of, well, it's already out there, so it's not illegal for me to share it, right? And it's like legality and ethics are not the same, right? Like just because it's legal doesn't mean it's okay. And so I think that there just really needs to be a shift in allowing survivors to tell their own story, and at the very least allow them to have consent over telling their own story. Because if you bring it down to like the absolute basics, most of these stories are of people who have had their consent taken away in some way, shape, or form. So for other people to be telling their story without their consent or without their knowledge or without, you know, pointing back to them, it is taking their consent. I mean, at the end of the day, you are victimizing us by telling those stories. And I obviously don't say that to make you feel bad. I don't want you
No,
to
no.
feel,
I'm a
but
big
I
girl. I
think,
can own up to what I did. You know what I mean? And
yeah,
that's why I came clean. Yeah.
yeah, I think it's so important for people to see people like you who say, I messed up. Like I was doing and the best that I can. And I think that most people are doing the best that they can. They, hear these stories and they're like, wow, this is an amazing story. I want to share it. I want to tell it. But at the end of the day, like you said, with my professor at the academy sharing the story, other people telling my story, they get things wrong. Listen, it's been 20 years. I will tell parts and I'm like, wait, is that right? And it's my story, right? So even I can say things that are wrong. So obviously, just like a game of telephone, when someone else tells my story, it gets things wrong. And so I just think it's so empowering and impactful for those of us who are survivors to continue to move towards survival and being a thriver, to really own our stories. And I think it's just too easy to point back to most of us or to get consent. Um, and I would like to see more ethically thought out content, because this true crime genre, like it's taking off, right? Like it's the number one genre, I think, right now for podcasts and television. And so I get it, but at the end of the day, the people consuming it and the people who are producing it need to understand that there is a human behind that story, and you are taking something that is, probably the most personal thing to them and who they are, and you are sharing it and giving it without their consent. And just like we know that consent that's given once in, for instance, a sexual encounter, just because you gave consent once, it doesn't mean that you give blanket consent. I think that that's something that needs to be understood with the sharing of stories as well. Just because I consented once for my story to be shared doesn't mean that I blanket give you consent to share it. So I think there's a lot to be learned, and I think there's a lot of lessons. And I think as long as we all approach it with compassion and understand that we are all humans who make mistakes, I think that we can produce this content in a way that honors survivors and really helps them to continue to thrive.
No, absolutely. Well, and you said something great there at the end, talking about honoring survivors. So I have to ask you, how does it make you feel when people focus on, the serial killer aspect and about, all about him and all about his background and why did he do what he did? And that's the kind of stuff, like, I understand that there is educational value in studying people like that by people who have accredited backgrounds, studying people like that so that they can understand patterns and help hopefully prevent this. I understand that point. What I don't understand is why that focus comes so often in true crime. Like, what is the point of giving this person so much attention? And I figure if I'm already kind of irritated about it, it has to make you feel some type of way. So I want to ask you, how does that make you feel?
Yeah. So I see that. And what I understand is we as humans who would never victimize someone in that way hear these stories and we think, how does someone end up like this? Like, my brain can't comprehend how someone could think that it is the best idea to kidnap someone, right? Or murder someone. Like, I can't comprehend that. So I think that human nature is to try to understand why other people are different. And so I think that that's why a lot of people want to consume that. But you just, you, if you are consuming it, I would encourage you to consider how it would make someone who has been through that scenario feel to know that, you know, their photo is there beside their offender, their captor, right? So, when I see my photo and then his photo together, like, it's not about him, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I don't think it necessarily glorifies. I think a lot of people use that term that it glorifies this offender. But at the end of the day, if you want to empower survivors and you want to encourage them to thrive, then you want to let them take that ownership and let the story be about them and what they did. And when you focus so much on the offender, it really kind of takes away from their story. Um, and it continues to let that person have some type of say and control and influence in their life, right? So if you're talking about their offender, well, that person still has some influence in their life. And really, like, ultimately, that's not what we want. We want to move forward and move through it and continue to grow from it. I think for me, I see that um, more as trying to understand things. And when I look at it, I think I actually just had this conversation recently with someone else. When I see people who do bad things, I think, wow, they must be really broken. Like, there must be something really just broken inside of them. And not, um, I mean, it's different in a case to case basis. Um, because I personally, and I personally don't have issue with forgiving my captor. Um, and I think there's a lot of reasons. It's my lack of emotional connection. It's the way that I dealt with it. It's the fact that he's not here, right? Um, but I think that we just all have to find our own way to deal with that. Like, and if that is more injuring for you to consider, well, why did they turn out this way? Then you just don't consider it. But for me, I think I see that, and I think people are trying to find a reason, and I don't think it's justification, right? I think people are just trying to understand, maybe because they've been through hard things, or they've had someone who has victimized them and they never got an answer for why. And at the end of the day, there's no why. You're never going to get an answer to why someone did that, because there are bad people, because
Yeah.
people make mistakes, and sometimes they are knowingly making mistakes, and sometimes they're small and sometimes they're gigantic. And at the end of the day, it's not my question. It's not my responsibility to question why somebody did something. Like the answer is because there are bad people. That's it. There are
Yeah.
bad people in the world.
No, exactly. It's like I don't think that there can be a good enough reason that makes you feel better about it in any way. Like, oh, they were having a bad day.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't make you feel any better. Like you're like, no, like that.
Right.
I don't know. I have a weird thing with closure and answers. I just feel like it's
A myth.
kind of yeah. It's like a feel good subject that
Yeah.
isn't really there. You know what I mean? It's
No.
just it doesn't mean
Closure.
anything. I feel like it's just
Yeah.
yeah.
Closure doesn't exist. I think that there's, this misconception that we have to have some type of closure, or we have to have some type of retribution, or there has to be prosecution, or there has to be some way to tie this up with a pretty little bow. But at the end of the day, that's a total myth. Like those of us who have been through hard things, every day is going to look different. And we really have to let our healing be our thing that's not dependent on finding the reason why somebody did something, or let our healing be dependent on, a conviction, or um, whatever it could be, right? Like I think our healing has to be our own thing, and it just can't be dependent on the why.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. So, I mean, we touched on, creators covering these stories. And as much as I wish every creator would go out there and ask for consent, I don't think that's going to happen. So I have to ask, what can true crime creators and true crime consumers do to help support survivors like you?
I think the biggest thing that you could do is, let's say you're consuming content of someone telling someone else's story. Look at that content. Look in the comments. Look if they, in their words, or, see if they are tagging back to the creator. So one of the biggest ways to find out if a survivor is giving consent is obviously if they are on the podcast or they are being interviewed. Obviously, they have been, well, you can't even say that because people could very easily take my words, right? Like I'm sure you've experienced that where they can
Happened
take
to
your
me.
words. Yeah. So, I think reaching out to the creator or the survivor, I think um, tagging them, right? Or reaching out to them personally, sending them a message and saying, hey, I don't know if you saw this. Um, and I have seen so many like YouTube videos of people covering my story, and I get on YouTube and I leave a comment. I'm like, hey, as the survivor, it would be very helpful if you want to actually do something with this. You want to actually empower people, like at the very least, tag back to me, right? Post links to my social media. Because at the end of the day, for me, sharing is kind of just the beginning, right? It's like the base of the pyramid for me. There's so much that comes after that. I share my story so that I can share my healing, so that I can help empower people, so I can help reach people. So sharing my story is just kind of the very beginning for me. So if you want to empower me and help me empower other people, and this goes for any survivors, I think that just being a conscious consumer and looking for those podcasts who are supportive, who are considering their words and how they talk about these things. I think the more that people like you and I talk about what it means to ethically create true crime content, the more people will kind of realize how much content is out there where it's just not helping people. It's just kind of consuming people's brains. And so look for tag backs. That's like the bare minimum, right? Like a tag back to the creator, where at least, or the survivor. I keep saying creator, but the survivor tagging back to their social media, or pointing back to them in some way, shape, or form so that they can maintain ownership. But I mean, ultimately, I just wish people wouldn't tell other people's stories. But I know
Yeah.
that's not going to happen.
No, and that's fair. And I think that I have to say that, when it comes to missing people or like these stories that need urgent attention, like I get why other people tell these stories. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a missing person, I see all the time like missing children and I see nobody fighting for them publicly. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I just want to help. You know what I mean? So
That's
as a
very
family,
different.
No,
That's very
that's
different,
yeah.
right?
No, and that's exactly
Because
my
it's an
point.
exigent need.
And yeah, and that's exactly my point is unless there's some direct call to action, which we'll get to, I am going to ask you to do a call to action because that's what we're all about here on Voices for Justice. But unless there's some way to actively help, you know what I mean, or feature some type of learning moment, I do feel like it's different. Like why, for me, in true crime, intentions are everything. So it's why are you telling this story? Why are you telling it the way that you are? Why are you focusing on the things that you're focusing on? Is it to get downloads? Because a lot of the time I think it is. And I'm sure that you've heard your story told in a million different ways. And I'm sure you can see it from a mile away. People who are in it maybe for better reasons than others. I mean, how do you feel about all that?
I'm so glad that you asked that question because it touches on something that I myself have kind of struggled with, which is why am I telling my story even, right? So the why behind it, I think, is very important. So are they telling it to highlight, to point back to that person? But with myself personally, I struggled with that because I was sharing my story for a while before I had my children. And I kind of stopped because I felt like, why am I doing this? I wanted there to be, an engine driving this train. Why are we doing it? Are we doing it to empower survivors, to have a teachable moment? I think that that's another way to just consciously consume. Um, and I think that once you begin looking at it, it becomes very apparent. I think once you're aware of it, um, why are they telling this story? And I think that there are plenty of people who tell stories for a reason, and I think that that's very important. As long as we are able to like take a lesson from it, or like you said, have a call to action, I think that that can be very helpful. But just the sharing to share, like telling the story just to consume it, just to tell the story, I think can be very problematic for a lot of reasons.
Yeah. I mean, I think I just see it all the time. You see these big features, especially when it comes to serial killers. I feel like it's just such a hot topic in true crime. It always like it's. I mean, I don't cover serial killers, so I don't know, but I imagine that it's a hot topic. And I mean, I
Yeah.
see it. I see the view. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
study this market. I'm in this market. I know which topics get more attention than others, and serial killers will always get attention. It's just one of those things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do have to question why people do it. I have to wonder, are you doing it to help? Are you making jokes about these serial killers because like why? Because you think it's funny, because you think it's quirky? I don't know. I know not maybe. I know that I'm a very sensitive person and I get so defensive of people I talk about. I get so defensive of survivors, of victims, everybody. And I don't know, it doesn't sit right with me. There's something about it that just feels very exploitative, very gross to just kind of mock these survivors and, the people who lost their lives. When you have a t-shirt that says, what is it? It's like choke me like Dahmer, eat me like Dahmer and choke me like Bundy or whatever. And it's
My
like,
God.
it's so bad. No, and it is one of the if you Google true crime t-shirts, you will see the most
Oh,
horrendous stuff
yeah.
come up. And
And
it's like
I will
it's
tell
like in
you,
no other vertical, man. In no other vertical
it,
would this happen. Imagine a
it's
t-shirt
so
like
true.
that about the Sandy Hook shooting. You know what I mean? Or about
Right.
9/11.
Like it wouldn't happen. And I
Mhm.
mean, just like you had to, come clean, I myself have to come clean because again, I had no like emotional connection to my trauma, right? And I had a very different experience than so many people. So for years, I never even considered. It's not that I necessarily consumed these things or promoted them, but I never considered how something like a blood spatter, this is something that I think we've talked about, like a throw with blood spatter on it could be. So I just never even thought about it, honestly, how that could be so harmful to victims. And then once someone brings it to your attention and you begin looking at it and you see the way people present true crime, like presenting true crime, anything with a blood splatter or like even a, a chalk outline or,
The bloody
like,
knife on the cover art every time.
I'm like, do you know, like, did you even stop to consider what that means? If you see blood splatter, like, that is a human lifeblood, right? Like, I think that it's just kind of been nonsensical and people aren't thinking about it. But I feel like the time really is it's a very poignant time right now for thinking about these things, because I think that we've already been kind of changing all of these narratives and how we look at things with more sensitivity. And so I feel like it is a very good time to talk about these things and what if we could do for true crime and for how we talk about victims versus survivors and offenders. What if we could do for those conversations what has been done for LGBTQ and for race relations, and like what if we could do for these conversations what has been done for those conversations? Like, think of how impactful that could be for so many people, because the fact of the matter is I think very few of us get through life without experiencing some type of trauma. It's a very human thing to experience trauma. And so, what if we could change how we talk about these things and to really empower people? It could just be one of the most impactful things and one of the most healing things on just such a broad scale.
No, I agree. And I think one of the hangups, at least what I see, as a true crime content creator, I mean, you are as well. We're going to get to your TikTok and you taking back your own story. We're going to talk about all that. But I think one of the biggest things is that creators, or even people like, me, if I wasn't a creator, people like you, like, they're not apt to admit that maybe I've done something that I don't really agree with now. Like, I think that maybe they're afraid of this cancel culture, right? Of, oh my gosh, if I do this, I'm going to be done. People aren't going to listen. And I don't like that doesn't like, if you really look at cancel culture, it doesn't really work. There are very few people that have really been like canceled forever and are just gone. It just doesn't really work that way. I feel like it's this scary buzzword that prevents people from just admitting that, like, hey, that was years ago or whatever, and I've grown since then. And like, in my mind, I see nothing wrong with that. Like, my whole approach with ethics and true crime isn't like, you're bad, I want you gone. It's like, hey, when people do survivors, victims, family members, whatever, feel a certain way. And if you care, that would be awesome. And maybe you could pivot your content a little or be more conscious of that. I know not everybody's going to do it, but I feel like it's this overall fear of like cancel culture, and people are just kind of unable to admit any wrongdoing. And I don't know how to change that. I hope that, me talking about my experience and you talking about your experiences can help, but I don't know. I'm shocked by the lack of people who are willing to come forward and say, hey, I've been creating true crime content for years. It's changed so much. I used to do it one way. Now I'm doing it another way. And I see why. Like, people are just, I don't know. I just wish more people talked about it.
I truly believe they will, because I think that authenticity breeds authenticity, right? The more people look at even like mental health conversations in the last 5-10 years, right? Like 10 years ago, it was absolutely like unheard of for somebody to say, I'm in therapy, right? And now now it's like, it's very popular. If you're like, you're not in
in
therapy?
therapy?
Yeah,
Exactly.
So, so I think the more that we talk about these things and the more people are like, hey man, I messed up, the more it inspires other people to say, oh, like they admitted it and they're okay and people still like them, right? I think, I messed up a few days ago because I was just, with all this stuff with Kanye West, I was just like consuming it. I was just like, oh my God, it's so interesting. And then I was like,
Yeah.
wait, this is harmful behavior. you know, I,
Yeah.
I was just caught up in this whirlwind where it's so entertaining. And I was like, wait, it's kind of problematic. And this could
Like,
be
that's
very
actually
hurtful.
harassment. Like, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's hard to see
Yes.
at first.
And exactly. And so I had a few friends who had posted something to that effect. And I was like, oh, I messed up. And I immediately owned up. I was like, hey, I might have messed up. Like I found it entertaining. But I think the more that people see other people apologizing and what that looks like and what true humility looks like, the more other people will do it. So all that to say, just keep doing it, because the more we are authentic, the more other people will hopefully follow suit.
Yeah. And I feel like that's a great way to earn respect in this industry as well. Nobody earns respect by avoiding these topics and avoiding, because people call them out all the time. You see it on social media, you see it in the comments on YouTube or
Oh yeah.
whatever. And come on, these creators see when 1,000 people comment the same thing, they see those comments. They can say that I don't read the comments, I don't read the reviews all you want. Like, if a million people
Yeah,
are telling you it, I have a really hard time believing that you never saw it.
I
So
agree.
yeah, I mean, hopefully, like, it's all just, I don't know, for me, it's just about being a good person. And I think
Yeah.
in the end, it will only do you a favor if you are just honest with your audience and respect your audience. Respect
Yeah.
your audience by being truthful with them. Like, I can't think of anything more disrespectful than that didn't have, like, just complete blinders. It's like,
Hmm.
these are the people who got you to where you are, that give you this platform that in most cases essentially pay your bills with these, with the ad revenue.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could talk about respecting your audience all day, but I do want to get to you taking back your story. And of course, specifically TikTok, because I could talk about TikTok till the end of time. So how did you do it? What made you want to, tell your story yourself on your own platforms?
Yeah. So I think for me, I was sharing my story after the academy. I was going and doing speaking engagements, and I didn't really know my why. I was just kind of doing it. People wanted me to come and speak, they would pay me to speak. Why not? Doesn't bother me. I stopped when I had my children because I just thought there wasn't a train that I didn't feel like that track was going anywhere. And so I stopped for a while. Elizabeth Smart reached out. She wanted to interview me. And I immediately said yes because I knew that she would do it in a way that was compassionate. And she did. And then I was able to do another project with her. And it was myself and 6 women who are all survivors and kind of telling our stories and forming connections and providing support to one another. It was something that was very healing for me. And after that, I thought, this is something that I feel like I'm good at. I feel like I'm good at telling my own story. I feel like I'm good with speaking in front of people. And I want to be able to give to other survivors what I was very lucky to receive on that couch with those 6 other women. And that is the connection of speaking to people who understand your soul and the things that you have gone through that are very personal. And I realized that there, like I said, there are so many people who go through hard things in their life and they may not have that connection to others. And so I feel like wanting to help other people have that connection and that form of healing was kind of what was driving me sharing. And so I realized I wanted to share my story. I wanted to help people ultimately. That was what it was about. I wanted to help people. And in order to do that, I needed to tell my story. And because otherwise, why would they listen to me, right? So I need to tell my story. And immediately it's like, well, what's the best means to tell my story? Well, social media. And it's like at that point, TikTok, when I first started forming this idea, TikTok wasn't really a thing. And I was like, oh, well, I don't even begin to know how to make myself stand out on Instagram or Facebook or YouTube, right? There are these gigantic monstrosities. Like, how do you yell into a chasm and make yourself heard? And so then TikTok came out, and I was like, well, this I can do. I think when it first started, it was what, like 30-second videos, right? Like 60 seconds weren't even a thing, much less 3 minutes. And so I was like, well, I can do a 30-second video, right? Like anyone could do that.
Yeah.
And so I picked up a couple of trends and did a couple of videos with some of the trends, and had a couple of videos go viral. And there's something very, very satisfactory about TikTok, and that it's a very quick turnover because it's a fast video, right? It's not like YouTube where you have to put out or a podcast, right, where you have to put out all this content, and it's just so overwhelming because where do you even start, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to start a podcast, but I was like, oh, you have to get a microphone. I have to figure out how to. It's just so much
I
stuff.
can help you anytime you want with that.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, there's just how do you edit it? And so, but TikTok, that's easy. I can do a video, and so I started doing that, and then there's just this appeal of actually seeing people, and you get this like real time, like people, bam, 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 commenting, and you can throw up a video response to, their comment. And so it was a very organic thing for me to want to share in that way, because I could actually connect with people. And there were I can think of a dozen different instances where I made actual connections with people. One that really, really sticks out in my mind is someone who saw my video and was actively being trafficked at that time. And,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, and reached out to me via DMs whenever strangers could DM you. This was, back when that was a thing, which I wish they would bring back. But she sent me a message, and I kind of like just talked to her. I just listened, honestly. I don't feel like I really did anything. I just listened and supported her, and just helped her to know that she was worthy and she was capable of better for herself, and kind of just shepherded her through that process of escaping. She later found out she was pregnant, and like what that meant to her. And she had been isolated from her family. And so it was just very unique in that I could actually impact people in a real way. And so that's what started kind of me sharing on TikTok. And TikTok, good, bad, and worse right now. I have a lot of feelings about TikTok. Um, but that's kind of what started that journey. It's a very long answer, but I really wanted to help people, and TikTok was one of the first ways that I was able to just reach actual humans, right?
Yeah.
Especially in those early days when it was easy. Now it's, again, TikTok's a chasm now, so it's a little bit like yelling into a chasm to get your voice heard over there. But that's how that started.
Yeah, no, and I agree with you about TikTok being different now. I mean, even with 1 million followers, I'll get videos with like 5,000 views, and I'm like, that's like mathematically impossible. Like, how does like you were showing this to like a fraction of a percent of my audience, and how the hell does that even happen?
That's what I'm experiencing. Like, I think I got shadow banned over there, basically, and I don't think it's ever gotten lifted.
Same.
Like, because I talked about too many things that were controversial, I guess. Controversial. I said sexual assault, too many times.
Exactly.
Basically.
And you didn't say it.
Right. I'm like, but it's my story. Like, so, yeah. So again, a fraction of the people see it, but I just have to ultimately hope that the people that need to see it will see it and produce content on other platforms. I'm most active on Instagram these days, just because I feel like people are more likely to see the things that I create over there than they are on TikTok, because I think less than 1% of the people that follow me on TikTok actually see my content. So.
Oh, I know. No, I have about like, I think I have like 54,000 people on Instagram and 1 million on TikTok, and more people see my Instagram than my TikTok. And it's like, again, I'm not a big math person, but I'm like, it doesn't math. Whatever this is not mathing correctly.
I know.
It's not mathing. But I do know, like, for me, TikTok was so addicting, not just because my videos were going viral, but because, like you said, the messages I was getting. It was, I got messages from people saying, I saw your sister's story, and now I'm trying to help my sister escape from abuse. I got a message from a lady who, I think she was a young woman who said that her parents owned a group home for girls, and they were abusing the girls. And because she heard the story, she went to police and outed them. And it's like, that is why I do what I do. I know.
Literally, I'm literally getting chills. I mean, that's why we do it, right?
Yeah.
I think there are definitely days where I'm like, social media is the worst. I don't want to do this anymore. And then, within 24 hours, I'll get this message where it's like, you have inspired me to do this and this. And I'm like, me? I'm like, what? Because I'm just here like living my truth and sharing authentically me along the journey. And it's messy and just who I am really. And that's what helps people. And ultimately that's why I keep going, because I definitely have days where I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore. I just want to be a normal human.
Yeah.
And then I realize that I'm impacting people's lives. And that's that's why I do it. And that's why it's important to tag back to us, right? Because we can't help other people. We can't share our story and help other people without being tagged back to and without being um, able to have our voice.
Yeah, and I don't care how good of a storyteller you are, how good of a content creator you are, whatever host, survivors, victims, whatever, they're going to want to hear their story from someone who's been through it. You know what I mean? Like they can relate better to you than they can to some detached. And I'm not saying that in a mean way. It's just these creators
No.
haven't gone through it. So they're going to relate a lot more to your story than hearing somebody else tell it. And I think that that's really powerful. And another great reason to tag back to these creators, or at least, in the perfect world, get consent, get you to come on the show so you can tell it them yourself, so that people can actually connect with you on a different level than they wouldn't. They wouldn't have the same experience had a host just told your story in a more detached way, if you will.
Yeah, and I think myself and then several other survivors who are active on social media, a lot of us are more or less open books too, right? So you can come to us and you can be like, well, I didn't understand this part. I think that's another unique thing about social media that I am very thankful for, is people can come directly to me and they can say, well, I didn't understand this, or how did you feel when this happened? And I can then immediately answer it, right? And I can clear things up, because one of the things that I think a lot of people were very surprised by was I did like a few videos about not saying to people, I'm sorry, whenever they share their story. And several people were confused and they didn't understand it, because for many, many years, I did not share my story with people who did not already know, because that was their response. I would share, okay, this is this thing that happened to me. And they would look at me with like, it felt like pity, right? Sympathy feels a lot like pity from someone else sometimes. And they would say, I'm so sorry that that happened. And I said, don't say I'm sorry to survivors. And everyone was like, why? I don't understand. And even myself, I can fall into that trap because it's our automatic reaction. And so being able to explain that to people, that, well, when you say I'm sorry, the automatic response from that person that you're telling I'm sorry is, it's okay. And it's not, right? Like, it puts them in that awkward position, but it also, it makes us feel like, well, I will speak for myself and not for other people. I think that this can be very common for many people, but for me, whenever someone says, I'm so sorry that happened, it makes me feel like you feel sorry for me. I don't want you to feel sorry for me. I don't feel sorry for me, because this is a terrible thing that happened to me, but it has led me to where I am today. And I'm very, very blessed and very happy with my life. And I would never be where I am today had that thing not happened. But it also turns the focus back to you, the person that is saying, I'm sorry, right? Instead of saying, thank you for sharing that, right? Which is something that's very productive and empowering. You're saying, I'm sorry for what happened to you. So it's really just kind of a turn on words, and wow, thank you for feeling safe enough with me to share that. Or that might have been really difficult for you to share, but I thank you for trusting me with that information. I think that's just something that's just so much more empathetic and productive, right? Because it's like counterproductive to say, I'm sorry that happened.
Yeah. No, and I get it. I mean, I get why people say that, right? But it's also, I think it's important for people to understand that and again, our stories are very different, but when people ask about your life and then you kind of, I always feel like I'm like dumping this huge story on them. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, are you ready? You know what I mean? And then you dump it and you kind of wait and you're like, what are they, are we still friends? What's going to happen now? But I think
things weird now.
Yeah, exactly. Like, is so, and I always find myself apologizing. I'm like, I'm sorry, that was a lot. And it's like, it does put you in this weird position, but I love that you said, like, a better way to put that is like, thank you for telling your story. Cause yeah, it's kind of mortifying when you dump this on people and people, I'm so sorry. And you're like, no, like and then you kind of have to backtrack and talk about like how well adjusted you are. And like, you're like, I'm okay. I'm actually, I'm not like going home and crying every single night. I promise. Like, I still like live an active, regular life like everybody else. Like like you almost have to prove that you're not shattered into a million pieces. You know what I mean? Like it's a weird thing.
It was like the most dreaded question when people be like, "Oh, you work in law enforcement. How did you get in law enforcement?" And I was like,
Hmm.
well, like
Yeah.
how deep in this do I want to go? And I would just say, oh, like the sheriff is a family friend. That was just like the easy way to do it, right? 'Cause I'm
Yeah.
like, I don't want to go into how I really ended up in law enforcement. Like that's messy and it's weird, and nobody wants to just be like, well, actually. So yeah, and I think when we know better, we do better, right? So that's why I was like, okay, well, let me try to give you some other options, other things that would be helpful to say, because I think sometimes we want to convey our feelings towards that person, right? So that's why we say, I'm so sorry. But just, we'll just keep talking about it and teach people what are some better things to say.
Yeah, well, and on that same, breath of thinking there, I always hear you call yourself a survivor and not a victim, and I think that that's really powerful. And I just wanted to learn more about that from you.
Yeah. So this is, I think, very early on, I never identified myself as a victim. Even in my very early, like public speaking events, I would say I don't identify as a victim, and the reasoning behind that is because when you think of the term victim, um, so from a law enforcement perspective, if someone was a victim of a carjacking, if they were a victim of a burglary, a theft, whatever, that would be defining them as someone who had something taken from them, right? So I don't identify as that because I don't feel like this person took anything from me. I refuse to give him the power for me to be identified as something that is lesser, because I feel like that gives the offender power. Well, he took something from me and I refuse to give him that power. So the other option is that I'm a survivor. I'm a survivor of a serial killer, right? I'm a survivor of an assault. I'm a survivor of a kidnapping because he did not take anything from me. I get to choose what I take from that situation, right? So for me to take my power back, I get to pick up what I want from that and take it away. And for me, I choose to take away strength. I choose to take away a refining. I choose to not let him continue to have power over me by identifying as a survivor and not being defined by it. Because I think ultimately, when you're a victim, you're being defined by this thing that happened. So that's kind of the way I've worked it in my head for victim versus survivor and what that means to me.
No, and I love that. And I think that some creators out there, or, when I say creator, I also mean like national media. You know what I mean? I think that
Mm-hmm.
they use the term victim, and they may even hear you say that and say, well, whatever, it's just, it's just words. It's just a small difference. But it's like, you don't understand what that could mean to a survivor. If they hear constantly over and over again, the victim of this, the victim, 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 that gets into your brain. And sometimes you may not even know it. You know what I mean? And not everybody is as well adjusted or strong willed as you, as much as I wish everyone who experienced something similar was. There are a lot of people that are left, very hurt by this. And that's totally understandable. Everybody's journey is different. And I think that just the simple shift in mindset of calling people survivors instead of victims could help more people than maybe creators or the media know. So I love that you make that point, and I think it's really important.
What they did to your family, you're lucky to make it out alive.
Streaming on Peacock.
These men are going to come after me. Taking them out is my only chance.
Put a bullet in her head.
From the co-creator of Ozark.
Looks like a family was running drugs.
Execution-style killing, it's rare for the Keys. Any leads on who they might have been running for?
The cartel killed my family. I'm gonna kill them. All of them.
MIA. Streaming now. Only on Peacock.
Now, part of taking your power back too, and I know that I could talk to you forever, so I promise that I will be wrapping it up soon. But
Okay, no, you're fine.
So I watched your documentary, Escaping Captivity, the Kara Robinson story, and I want to talk about all of that. But what really got to me was you were an executive producer on that project, and that doesn't always happen. Sometimes, a lot of times, survivors won't get paid, they won't get a credit. Their stories are just kind of, and I'm sure that they're excited to tell their stories and happy to do it, but they don't realize that they're giving up a lot of control by not having these positions. They'll tell their story and all of a sudden it comes out in a weird way they didn't expect. And it's my understanding that because you had this executive producer credit, that didn't happen, that you were pretty happy with the way that it turned out. So I just wanted to get all of your feelings on that.
Yeah, so I had told my story previous to this in a couple of different formats and different shows, and I was never happy with it. It's a big part of the reason why I stopped sharing my story, because I felt like it was sensationalized. I felt like things were, different parts of my story were focused, more heavier than things happen in actuality. And so when I began going on this journey to wanting to help people, I realized I had to tell my story, and I wanted to do it in a way that felt genuine to what I experienced, as well as in a way that I was proud of. I needed to have something I could point people back to and say, go watch this. This is what happened to me, so that I could then go on and help people. And so when I decided that was something that I wanted to do, I reached out to Elizabeth Smart and I said, this is something I want to do, and I'm brand new to this world and what it means. And I said, do you have any recommendations? And so she pointed me towards a production company that I ended up working with, who was just fantastic. They made me an executive producer. And that meant that I really was involved from the beginning to the end of that process. I got all of the cuts. I was part of formulating what it would look like. I just very involved from beginning to end, so that I could be proud of it. And if there was something that I said, I don't like the way that's looking, or the way that this is told, I would have control over that. And so that was something that was very empowering. And I feel very lucky to have had that experience. But I also will tell people that if you want to tell your story, that this is something that was helpful to me, because I think often we feel like, okay, well, we have to seize this opportunity because someone wants me to tell my story. But hold out, because if someone wants your story and they don't want you to be part of it, you don't have to tell your story. You can wait for someone who will let you be a part of it and who will let you be involved. So for me, that was very impactful. And I was there from the very beginning, where we filmed a reel that was then pitched to networks, and very, very involved throughout the process. And now that's something I hold out for. If people want me to go and do other things, I'm like, executive producer or nothing. Like, I will not be participating in anything that involves my story unless I have control over it, because I want ownership of my story, and I want it to be something that I am proud of, that I can point back to and be like, yeah, this is factually accurate, and I approve this message, right? So I want to point back to things that I feel are genuine to me and my story and my truth and my soul. And so yeah, that was something that was it was a great experience. And I trust that production company just with everything that I could ever possibly do.
No, and it's so smart. I've been involved in projects where I was interviewed and I had no control over the project. And I think when you go into true crime, you're like, well, everybody's in it because they want to help. That's why they're in this business. And that's just not the truth. And I've had so many disappointing experiences where they told me it was going to go one way and it went another way, and I have no control. And that's a really crappy place to be in. So I just really thought that was important to talk about your executive producer credit, because I think a lot of, families and survivors and people telling their own stories don't really know that that's an option. I can't tell you how many times I've been told, well, that's not ethical. And it's like, what do you mean it's not ethical? You want to use the entire basis of my work as your framework, but it's not ethical to have me involved. Like, it's a really weird thing. And I think, fighting for the rights of survivors, of victims, of family members is something that's kind of new. And it's something that we do work on in a capacity together on a whole other project.
Yeah.
But I just want to kind of highlight that fact that I don't think people realize that when you go to a big crime convention, you see a big name TV personality, they're getting paid to be there. When they have a victim, a survivor, a family member speak at those events, those people are told, we can't pay you. It's not ethical. And it's not, I don't think anybody's out here trying to be greedy. I don't think that's the thing. I think it's, why is that person who has no ties to this story getting paid? And you're telling me it's not ethical to pay me? Like, I think a lot of people don't realize that that's what's happening in the media behind the curtain of all of this.
Yeah, because let's be honest, Sarah, how does our society place value on something? They assign it a monetary value, right?
Right.
So I think for most of us, it is not about the money. We do not care. We are doing this to help people at the end of the day. However, it is consuming our time, and our time needs to be considered valuable as well as our sharing. And we assign value to things by assigning a monetary value. So by not paying survivors or victims for their content, or I mean, I'm sure you get this all the time. Can we use your social media content for a story we're doing about you? And I'm like, no,
Yeah.
no, you can't. So
Without linking back to me, you just want to take my video and put it in your story. And I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that, it has to be changed. And it's very tricky because I think a lot of people hear that and they see us talking about these things and they're like, oh, well, she just wants to get paid. It's like, I mean, yes,
we want to be treated fairly.
Right. And it is our job, right? Like,
yeah.
I don't think people realize how much time and effort it takes to produce this content. Like, even if I record a 30-second video, guess what? It's going to take me 30 minutes to record a 30-second video, right? Because I have to think of it. I have to add the captions. I have to do all these things. So I think that it's just so important to highlight, like you said, that the media very often, they're like, oh, we're a media, we're a news organization, so we can't pay you for your story because it's unethical. It's like, just because you're paying me doesn't mean I'm making it up. It's not unethical. So I think that it's a very fine line to walk. I think it's very difficult to navigate, and it's been done so long a certain way. They're like, well, we've been doing this forever and no one's ever questioned it. It's like, yeah, well, you've been hurting people, and you and I personally know many, many people who've been hurt by these practices. And I think people don't know it, and it's all about this conscious consumerism, where it's, we can be thoughtful about what we're consuming and how it could be harmful to people. And we're not looking for hundreds and hundreds and thousands of dollars for sharing our story, obviously, but some type of just acknowledgement that our time is valuable would be nice.
Well, yeah. And I mean, they bring up the ethics of it, right? Tell me what's ethical about a huge booming industry like true crime. And I mean, I would venture to say at least 90% of all the profits go towards creators that are just telling these stories secondhand. And I mean, I think that's being generous to say that 10% is going back to the people who are most affected by these stories. I really don't think the number's that high. So if you want to talk about ethics, let's talk about that.
And I don't know what the answer is in that kind of situation either, right? Like, and you and I are willing to learn, right? Like, if you have something that you feel like is the answer to that, please, by all means, tell us what it is. But at the end of the day, I mean, it is exploitation. Like, let's get really down to the definition of exploitation. It is me making money off of you, right? Like, that's exploitation. And when you have these creators who are telling our stories and they are making money off of it, it's like, do you not see how that's problematic? I don't know how people don't see that, but I think talking about it, hopefully that can help people just kind of have some sort of basis of knowledge of what it feels like to us who are being taken advantage of. Because, I mean, that's what it feels like to most of us.
No, absolutely. And it is a case-by-case basis. When I was fighting for my sister, I was like, please, feature her story, make all the money you can off of it. I wanted it to be a moneymaker for them because I wanted it to be an appealing story for them to cover so that I can get justice for my sister. But now that an arrest has been made, now that I don't think that there's a huge call to action where people can actually help, when I see it being covered now, it definitely feels different. It's like, well, why are you telling this story, especially depending on how they tell it? But yeah. Again, if you want to talk about ethics in true crime, don't tell me it's ethical to pay creators all the money and it's not ethical to give, it's not ethical to pay any of the victims or any of the survivors or any of the families. Like that line of thinking will never make sense to me. And it's not because I want all the money in the world. It's because I care about ethics in true crime and I care about these families who are often left devastated and penniless after trying to search for their loved one or get justice, whatever it is. And they have to watch these people make potentially millions of dollars off of, something like a Netflix documentary about their family. It's not fair.
Yeah, no,
it's not fair. But I know that I know that it's a long conversation, so I want to get to what you're doing now, all the amazing things that you're doing. I am kind of addicted to your fitness videos. I mean, as much as I love your true crime content, I'm like, wow, what a great way to heal and to kind of work through that. I think that it's really cool. So again, what are you up to now?
Yeah, so I have a lot of kind of behind the scenes things, kind of plates I'm spinning that I can't really talk about, but day to day, I am really just producing content, being authentic online, and primarily I'm most active on Instagram, but just showing people what healing looks like. And here I am 20 years later, and I am very much in the trenches of healing right now. And I think just providing people with a framework for how different healing can look. So I do post a lot about my fitness. That's been one of the biggest things, especially in the last 5 years, that helps keep me sane. I think my thoughts can be very chaotic. It feels a little bit in my head like what I described to my husband is like a cardboard box that somebody dumped 100 bouncy balls into, and my thoughts are just kind of like ting, 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 ting. But then when I'm in nature or I exercise, it kind of helps put things where they belong. It kind of calms and quiets things down. So I do post a lot of content about, the things that have helped me along the way to heal, because therapy, let's face it, it may not be part of your journey, but it's also not very accessible for a lot of people to get the type of therapy that they need. So I am an example of that. The type of therapy that I need is really just not accessible to me at this point. And so I think that the more we are able to take the power back into our own hands and heal ourselves, if we're able, I think that can just be so healing to heal ourselves, right? It can be so empowering to know that we have control over so many aspects. And there's so many simple things that I think we don't think about. So producing a lot of content around that. I go and do speaking engagements all over the place, speak to all types of people. I do speak a lot to law enforcement, which is obviously something I'm very passionate about, because I think that that gives me the ability to impact survivors from the ground level when I can educate law enforcement to how to empower victims to become survivors. So I do that. I'm probably going to be writing a book. So
Yay!
yeah, so lots of things like that. But definitely active online, and if I don't post anything for like 48 hours, somebody come find me, because something's probably happened.
I'll be on it.
Yeah. Come knock on my door, be like, "Hey, are you okay?"
Exactly. Like, who is this lady? But okay, so where can people find you and all these amazing things if they want to book you for a speaking engagement, if they want to reach out to you, where can people find you?
So I have a website, KaraRobinsonChamberlain.com. I have all my links to my social media there, but my social media handles on Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram are Kara Robinson Chamberlain. I have a Twitter. I don't really post much on it, honestly. I've had it since 2008, but those are the best ways to find me. Kara Robinson Chamberlain on TikTok, Instagram, and then my website, KaraRobinsonChamberlain.com.
Perfect. And last but not least, what is your call to action for this episode? What can my listeners do anything. It's your call to action.
Yeah, I think that my call to action really is just for people to be more thoughtful and aware and compassionate of what they are creating and consuming. I think that your listeners will be the type of people that are consuming true crime, right? And so I think just if they're listening to you, they've probably already thought about this, but just consciously thinking about your words, your consumption. Think about, if I say this, is it going to, or if I do this, or if I listen to this, is it empowering? Because I think most people go through hard things, and we want to be empowered. We want to create survivors. And you can never underestimate how a small action or a small word could really impact someone in that journey. And so just thoughtfully, consciously, ethically consuming and creating and speaking to people. That's my big call to action.
I love it. I do have to say I have a great audience, but I'm sure some people hate listen or my audience can, tell a friend. So I love that. I really do. I think it's really important. And again, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for telling your story. I am so happy to have had you. And I hope that it helps. I hope that this conversation helps shift the narrative. I think it's an everlasting, ever-going kind of conversation, but hopefully it helps. So just thank you so much for being on the show.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I so enjoyed our conversation. And I could talk to you for hours.
And we'll have to do like a separate tangent podcast or something.
Yeah, for sure.
Just called Tangents.
Yes.
All right. Perfect. Well, thank you.
Of course.
Thank you so much for listening to my discussion with Kara. I hope that by continuing to discuss how true crime impacts those who have experienced it firsthand, we can all continue to try to make it a better space for these survivors, families, and victims. I also hope that by being open about my own mistakes, I can encourage other creators to do the same. True crime is a tricky, sensitive subject, but an important one. As long as creators and consumers come into this space with good intentions and a commitment to learn and grow with each case, I really think we can do some good. But as always, thank you, I love you, and I'll talk to you next time. Voices for Justice is hosted and produced by me, Sarah Turney. For more information about the podcast, to suggest a case, to see resources used for this episode, and to find out more about how to help the cases I discuss, visit voicesforjusticepodcast.com. And if you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to rate and review the show in your podcast player. It really does help more people find the podcast and these cases in need of justice. Welcome to the Voices for Justice Secret After Show. I learned so much from Kara. I mean, I can talk about ethics in true crime until I am blue in the face, but I don't know what it's like to be on Kara's side of it all. So I think listening to her and how the true crime industry has affected her is very important. Like I said, I learned a lot and I hope you did as well. Kara is doing very important work in this industry for other survivors like her, and I can't wait to continue working with her. Now, I do have an update in the Naomi Arion case. Unfortunately, just a few hours after I published my episode about Naomi last week, it was announced that her remains were found. It was also announced that Troy Driver is being charged with the murder of Naomi. It's obviously not the outcome any of us were hoping for, and all I can say is my heart goes out to Naomi's family. Also, I'd really like to encourage you to follow Naomi's sister on Twitter. Her username there is sweater_vest, and that way you can see any ongoing case needs. Now, switching gears, I did want to let you guys know that I am going to CrimeCon in Las Vegas at the end of the month. CrimeCon was gracious enough to let me join last minute after some of the dates of Alyssa's trial have settled. Now, because I am joining so last minute, like 3 weeks before the event, I have no idea if I will have any live shows or panels like I did last year. But you can absolutely find me at my booth on Podcast Row. I do try to stay at my booth pretty much all day to make sure I'm available to meet you guys, because honestly, that's the biggest reason I go. I almost never go to any of the panels or programming unless my friends are in it. I sit at my booth pretty much all day and just wait for you, so please stop by and say hello. And there may or may not even be a special mystery guest at my booth. Also, I posted this on social media, but I wanted to put it here too. I know what it's like to literally drain my savings to go to CrimeCon to advocate for my missing loved one. So if you have a missing or murdered loved one that you would love to advocate for at CrimeCon but just can't make it to Vegas to do so, please send me a flyer. I will pay for the printing and display it at my booth. You can send those to sarah@voicesforjusticepodcast.com, and that is Sarah with an H. Now, if you don't have a ticket to CrimeCon and plan on going, I want to encourage you to use code TRUECONSEQUENCES for 10% off a standard badge. Now, this isn't my code, but actually friend of the show, Eric Carter Londine's code. He came on the podcast some time ago to share his brother Jacob's case, and I would love if we could pay it forward a bit and use his code instead of mine. Like I said, advocating for your loved one isn't cheap and it isn't easy. So again, please use code TRUECONSEQUENCES for 10% off a standard badge. Now, the last thing I wanted to address was the fact that I'm getting quite a few messages from you guys saying, talking about my outro to this after show. You guys are saying that you love me and you're not tolerating me because I end it every time with, as always, thank you for tolerating me. I love you. I'll talk to you next time. And I just want you guys to know that that's really more of just a private joke between us. I know that you guys love me. I don't think that you're just tolerating me. It's just kind of a joke because I always ramble in this after show. And I also talk really fast, which I did in this episode too, because that's just my natural way of being with people. But yeah, I just want to let you guys know that I don't think you guys are really tolerating me. It's just more of a joke because this after show moment is optional. This is a place where I kind of break things down. I give you updates. It's my version of banter at the beginning of the show, just afterwards and a little more optional. So yeah, as always, thank you for tolerating me. I love you, and I'll talk to you next time.